Hello and welcome to another episode of Spark Talk. Today we're talking about working class defence. As we approach the festive season and the end of the year, it's important that we remember and keep alive the fight against injustice that our incarcerated brothers and sisters across the world are engaged in. But it's more than just remembering. Class struggle is a material thing. It needs money to pay lawyers, to build rallies, to print propaganda, to travel to and from court hearings, and much more. So to that end, I have invited on the show comrades from the Partisan Defence Committee. It's something that well, let comrades explain. But from the PDC, the Partisan Defence Committee, I've got John Piper from New York and Kat in London to tell us about some of their work in 2025, what's next, and how you can help us build the fight back. Welcome, comrades.
Hi.
Good to be here.
Thank you for making the time. Look, we've done a couple of episodes on the PDC before, but I think, as always, for me anyways, it's one of those things that it's always good to explain what the PDC is. So maybe John, I can ask you, can you give our listeners a sense of what exactly is the Partisan Defence Committee and why should they care? Why is it important?
Sure. The Partisan Defense Committee is a class struggle, non-sectarian, legal and social defense organization. And it has affiliated organizations around the world that various sections of the ICL have initiated. It's partisan on the side of the working class and non-sectarian, meaning we take up cases and causes that are in the interest of the whole working people, without regard to political differences, because it's in the interest of the whole working class to take up the defense of anybody that's under attack, as they were fighting for workers and the oppressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the famous, saying, an injury to one is an injury to all.
Exactly. And actually, this is something the Spartacus League in the U.S. initiated in the 70s, but it's in the tradition of the International Labor Defense, which was an organization the Communist Party initiated in the 1920s that took up the defense of Sacco and Vanzetti, the Italian anarchists that were executed in Massachusetts. And we initiated it taking up the case of Chilean mine workers that were under attack by the Pinochet regime. And also we raised money in the early 80s for British miners that were on strike against the Thatcher regime and the famous miners' strike.
So your work is also international.
Yes, it's always been international.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that being said, I've got both of you, one from the US and Kat from Britain. I guess my reason for this was to just give our listeners a sense of some of the work that we've engaged in over the year, but also, some of the stuff that we're doing currently, because as we know, the world is becoming a more and more difficult place to live in, and across the world there's more and more growth of repressive reactionary governments, and what that means is, of course, the working class and oppressed are the first to get attacked. Maybe Kat, I can turn to you to kind of ask about what's the PDC in Britain been up to, and how does this link to how you see the aims of the PDC?
Well, we've just had a really nice kind of end of year holiday celebration that's really made a point about celebrating the fact that we've actually done a lot of work this year, including sort of the important work of building United Front sort of campaigns, with other organizations, which is like a key part of our work. Having said that, I think it would be remiss in not kind of starting with what is actually one of the main things happening in Britain, which is right now, there are young activists from the pro-Palestine milieu, who are on hunger strike. And this is the first hunger strike, I think, in a significant kind of a way since the 1981 hunger strike, in Ireland, the Irish hunger strike. So it kind of weighs a little bit heavy. And I think there's sort of two elements to it, which is, on the one hand, these kids are extremely courageous, like committed to the cause to fight against this genocide, and Britain that continually arms Israel. They were arrested, some of them over a year ago, and they've been held in prison for at least a year, if not longer. And some of their trial dates are not until next 2027. So they've embarked on this hunger strike to try to kind of demand that they be bailed, that they have that Elbit be shut down, and a number
That's a
of other
weapons factory.
yeah, the
Looks like,
weapons
yeah.
factory. And there's been nightly demonstrations in Britain. Today,
Mhm.
Sarah Sultana went down to one of the prisons to demand that they call an ambulance for one of the hunger strikers who's been on hunger strike for 46 days, which is, reaching a very critical point. And so there is, and on the other hand, you have the British, and there's a lot of appeals being made to the British government, which is in some, I don't know exactly how to say this, but the British government has been supporting this genocide since the beginning. Starmer came out early on in support of what Israel was doing. To think that this government can be shamed into action to support this cause I don't think that's what's going to happen,
Yeah, in fact, actually, Jeremy Corbyn raised this in the Parliament, and for all his problems, good for him for doing that. But the reaction from the Labour Party MPs was first, what he was doing was he was highlighting that these hunger strikers, some of whom, have you said, have been on a hunger strike for over 40 days and are in really, really critical conditions. And Corbyn was just saying, look, the government needs to deal with this. You need to give them adequate help. You need to listen to what they're saying. You need to, and the guy started by saying no. And then what happened is a lot of the Labour MPs, they laughed. It was absolutely sickening. So this is the government that these guys are up against.
Exactly. And that's what makes this even more difficult, the situation. And I think, if 2 years of mass protests on the street did not move this government to into a different course of action, but they're very happy to just let this situation develop as it may,
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a need for a different sort of strategy for the Palestine milieu that actually can really help these kids that are on hunger strike right now, these activists who are so committed to this cause,
Yeah, I mean, I think bottom line is Britain saw some of the largest protests in the world for Palestine, which is great. But I think if you look at what they achieved in terms of bending the will of the Labour government, not much. And I think, if the Palestine movement had real strength that it could make the government do what it wanted, then the hunger strikers wouldn't be in this position. I think at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. And, it's because of all the things that are holding back the struggle. Not, of course, the trade union movement. It's not really been mobilized and so on and so forth. But yeah, so right now, Britain, what's happening is these hunger strikers the government is doing absolutely nothing about them. But as my understanding is, also a bit of a marginal thing. There have been nightly demos, but they're rather small. And yes, a couple of prominent MPs are taking up the cause, but it remains to be seen what's going to happen.
Yeah. And there is, what also is, I think quite a determined media blackout, like none of the press is reporting about this, and that's quite calculated.
Yeah, absolutely. As always. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's the main thing. Let's jump to John. What's some of the recent work that you guys have been doing in the US?
Well, we're working on holiday appeals here in the latter part of January. We initiated in the 80s class war prisoners stipend fund that sends monthly stipends to people that are in prison for fighting against racism and capitalism. And for all of us, we think it's our duty to fight for the people that are behind bars because they fought for us. So we send $100 a month to a series of class war prisoners. There's been 10 that we've sent money to in the past year. Going back to when the program was set up, 2 of the recipients were British miners that had been jailed after the strike in the 80s. Currently, we send money to Mumia Abu Jamal, who's a former Black Panther that was framed up in 1981, and he's innocent. There's a mountain of evidence that proves that he did not shoot the cop. Yeah, and as staff counsel at the PDC, I was one of his lawyers back in the 90s.
That's cool.
Helping to amass the mountain of evidence of his innocence. He's a former Black Panther MOVE supporter. He was a famous journalist who was targeted for repression. Leonard Peltier is also very well-known Native American activist who was framed up in the 70s and recently was released from prison to house arrest. So he's still in the clutches of the capital estate, and we still send him money and fight for his complete freedom. And Shanachli is a Chicano activist from Texas who's been in solitary confinement for 20 years.
What?
All of these prisoners...
20 years of solitary confinement?
Yeah, they're really
What?
out to crush that kind of resistance.
What's his
And,
case about?
well, he had been framed up once. He's in a small southwestern Texas county. If you've seen that movie, No Country for Old Men, that's sort of what it's like. And he was an activist. They framed him up once, and a newspaper reporter exposed the frame up, and he was released. And then the sheriff came to his door to try to serve a warrant on him, pointed a gun at him. Shanachli was able to defend himself and disarm the sheriff. And so they charged him with assaulting a sheriff and put him away again for decades imprisonment. And all of these three prisoners are in their 70s and 80s, so they're all suffering from prison neglect of their medical conditions. Amumia's had vision problems. Peltier's had a number of issues, and Shanachli is in the hospital right now. So it's really vital to get these cases known. You know, we can't gain new ground if we're not fighting for the people that fought for us. They're still in prison. Some others in the last year, actually, there were 4 Palestine Action U.S. activists who interfered with production at a Nelbit plant in New Hampshire. They were called the Merrimack 4. They got 60 days in county jail up there. So we included them in the stipend program and got some very nice letters about just what it meant to them to be getting the money in prison, to be able to buy things in the commissary. There were 4 abortion rights activists in Florida who got jail time for protesting against some anti-abortion clinics that had been set up in the guise of being pregnancy counseling centers. They're happily all out of prison at this point.
Okay. Wow. I appreciate you laying out some of the people that received the PDC stipend, because it gives a sense of, I think, a little bit of the cases and the range of the work that you guys have been doing, obviously, for decades now. So I really appreciate, going from abortion activists to Black freedom fighters to Indigenous rights activists and so on. So that gives us a sense, because ultimately, Black question, woman question, and these are all huge questions in American society. Similarly, Palestine, huge burning questions for our day. Okay, as you mentioned at the outset, like right now we're talking to you two from the US and Britain, but we do have sister organizations in a couple of other places. But, where we don't, we also try and just make inroads, or just because we don't exist in a country where a particular person is being gone after does not necessarily mean that we're not willing to take up their struggle, but also to try and materially help them. And I just want to make a plug that the PDC has come out in defense of Omar Khalid, who is Indian activist. He's Muslim. He's been in prison for years now because he was fighting the Hindu nationalist right-wing government, and he's in prison for sedition. And it's a total frame-up. But we don't exist in India. But I think that's a hugely important case to take up, because again, it illustrates our internationalism. It illustrates, that we are going to take a stand against reactionary governments wherever they are, to the best of our abilities. So I appreciate that. Okay, so I guess, like I said, I wanted this to be a bit of a summary also of what you guys' work has looked like this year. 2025, if I step back and think of it, so much has happened that it's kind of hard to really pin down certain events, I feel, in a way. But maybe you guys can just tell us, some of the main things. I know, Kat, at the event that we just had in London, I was there, and you had a really nice compilation of some of our cases where we've gone to rallies, we've been raising money, we've been donating money. So maybe to just give our listeners a sense of what that's looked like.
Yeah. actually taken off from the point you were just making about the international character of our work. Earlier in the year, I think it was around April, early May, the Pakistan government went after the Awami Action Committee and Ehsan Ali in Pakistan just for organizing protests, in defense of poor people, very basic democratic demands. And, we participated in the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCI International, was organized protests that we went to. And one of the things that we actually recognized or that became clear was sort of the conflict over the question of Imran Khan, which I wanted to just kind of make the point that then a few weeks after some of the protests that the RCP had organized at the Pakistan embassy for the Awami Action Committee comrades, we went to an Free Imran Khan demonstration in London and actually took those placards for Ehsan Ali with us, to kind of make the point that this struggle actually, those two cases are really quite linked. It's like the Pakistan government is going after these guys in Gilgit-Baltistan, and at the same time, Imran Khan is
former prime minister, by the way. Former prime minister, by the way.
Former prime minister is in prison, but it's all happening at the behest of this kind of repression is coming at the behest of the U.S. imperialists. And so actually being able to connect those and having those struggles with the comrades in the RCI too over actually the necessity of linking those two cases because you're facing the same enemy. And if you're both the Pakistan regime as well as U.S. imperialism, it's really crucial to link those fights. So it was and then when we went to the Imran Khan demonstration, it was actually very well received, to have those other cases kind of highlighted as well. So it wasn't to people that this made no sense that there was a connection, it really did make sense. So I kind of, that was sort of a useful episode, a useful part of the work that we did.
I'm sorry, I can't help but have an opinion on this whole thing, just because I think I talked to a number of Pakistani leftists and we wholesale got made fun of or, mocked or denounced for taking up the defense of Imran Khan, former prime minister who is in jail, has been in jail for years now. Because I think in the heads of, quote unquote, Marxists and revolutionaries, they're like, well, he was a terrible guy. He's, part of the elite and so on and so forth. So you guys are basically crazy. And I think the point is exactly what you said, that in the heads of normal people, who, by the way, Imran Khan remains hugely popular in Pakistan right now. The point is not that we're endorsing Imran Khan's politics. And I think this goes back to what John was laying out. Like, why is attacking Imran Khan, the former prime minister, who, by the way, was no angel, but still is very popular? Why is that important? Well, again, as you've been mentioning, U.S. imperialism. Why is he in jail? Why did he get booted out of government? It's the army and its alliance with the U.S. imperialists. So I'm sorry, but to all the leftists who might be Pakistani who are listening, it's to link the two things. The condition of Pakistan today is absolutely terrible because of imperialist oppression. So you need to kind of make the link for people that that's the case. So again, to link to just how broad our work can be, defending left-wing activists in Pakistan, but linking that defense to, I think, Imran Khan as well, illustrate the non-sectarian nature, but also that we're taking a side here against imperialism.
Those kind of struggles against, in defense of people who are being gone after for however way that they oppose, whether it's defending poor people or putting forward socialist politics in Pakistan, or as Imran Khan being thrown in jail because he opposed, he didn't go along with whatever the Americans wanted him to do. It's a way to also help strengthen sort of those struggles, against imperialism, and to kind of make it clear that that's really what's posed. It's like these kind of defensive struggles that are oftentimes small and relate isolated or whatever. So another really important campaign, which actually ended up having a success, which I'm happy to report, is that the PDC around the world, where we have sister organizations, but also where we have, where the ICL has sections, organized protests at the Nigerian embassy in defense of people activists who had opposed the Tinubu government's kind of starvation policies in Nigeria. And actually, the court case dragged on, And then just last week, actually, on the 10th, the courts finally dropped the case against them. They were facing charges of treason, which carry the death penalty. So it was really quite a severe, very, what's the word? Not drastic, draconian repression that they were facing for protest.
The death penalty, yeah, for sure.
And so, together with like our comrades in the US and Mexico, South Africa, elsewhere, we helped organize these protests. And one of the things that was, the point of the way that we do our work in terms of rallying around cases and causes that are in the interest of the working class, that are despite political differences between different organizations. So, some of the comrades that faced the repression in Nigeria that were going on trial in Nigeria were from two different organizations. One was from the CWI and some were from the International Socialist Alternative. And really in London, at least, these two organizations organized their own protests, like separately at the Nigerian embassy, which really helps to only divide the forces that are actually fighting for these people or could potentially be mobilized to fight for these people. So I think at some point we did convince the two groups as well as a few others to come out on it last November and then had an international protest day. But it's precisely to kind of, there is, in the face of repression, you really do need to mobilize the broadest the broadest forces that you can. Mm-hmm. And you can have your arguments about the perspectives, your political struggles, but without being able to actually stand together on a case where there is a clear and present danger to the people that are actually going to carry out any kind of struggle, you're kind of giving up before you've even started, So that's why that defense work and doing it in a united front way, i.e. march together, is...
Yeah, exactly. And I think you said the word there, united front. And that's kind of, I think, a huge part of our work, that we are constantly trying to mobilize other groups, other organizations to join together on an issue. Put your differences aside. We have many. Of course, the left is known for its differences. But, how can we disagree on defending pro-Palestine prisoners? We can't. So we're all fighting for that. We all think that that's bad. So why don't we work together so that we can bring together more and more forces, the more the better. So I think that's ultimately what we try to do in the course for work, and to build those connections, to strengthen the movement. Okay, and you also touched on that, we coordinate between where different organizations are. So I believe, the Nigeria event was an international thing where we did multiple, I think on the same day or around the same time anyways, demonstrations outside the Nigerian embassies in the US and London and I think Mexico you mentioned. So, yeah. I think the other one is protesting against the repression by the French state. That was also one thing that you guys both took up in your respective countries. Maybe, John, you want to give us a sense of that one?
Yeah, in the spring, there was repression in France against a number of activists. Internationally, the PDC responded to calls for their defense by organizing protests where we were, from Paris to London to New York and around the world. In New York, we had a really united front of 100 people with left voice. We managed to organize a joint demonstration at the French consulate. It was very important to fight against that repression. George Abdallah was another of the cases we took up in that context.
I think you guys were able to work together, Left Voice. In the course of our recent work, I know that we've been working together on certain occasions with the Revolutionary Communist Group, which maybe, Kat, you can talk a little bit about, because some of their comrades are facing direct repression from the state themselves.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that in particular. There's a group on campus at SOAS called the Revolutionary Communist Group. They're also known as Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, FRIFI. They had, a couple students at a campus society in October, I think, 23. Sarah gave a speech at SOAS about, taking up defense of the Palestinian liberation struggle. A year later, she was arrested herself, and this is, mind you, for a speech on a campus. Uh-huh. She was arrested a year later, earlier this year, and she's facing charges under the Terrorism Act. And that could mean up to 14 years in prison, I believe, Uh-huh. And so we've always made a point that, including in the campaign around the French repression, that these the more we can actually try to link these cases and build their defense campaigns on the broadest possible scale, it will only help strengthen each individual sort of case in their own for them too. And so actually the RCG has been sort of notable in that they've really kind of taken up this question of united front defense. They've not only every time we've gone to one of their court hearings had let us speak, they've come to ours. They also came to our holiday, when we just had our recent holiday appeal. They also came and spoke. We've donated to their defense fund and signed letters in support of their work. So it really is kind of it's been very useful that in the course of participating in the defense campaign, we've been able to establish a relationship where it's based on that understanding that an injury to one is an injury to all, and that we have plenty of differences. I think some of them, they're kind of interesting differences to have and to try to have more political discussions about. But at the same time, they stand in real contrast to some of the other groups on the left, and I laud that as a useful example for how you can work together without disappearing the fact that you have differences, and at the same time actually try to broaden the defense work to broader layers. Not only in the left, but, in the working class too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe, I do totally commend them for that. The whole case is, I think, popular amongst the Palestine movements. So as too Sarah and I think another named Haya. But I think my understanding of, I don't know the organization very well, but I think it makes a difference when it is your organization and your own members who are facing the brute force of the state, then you want to gather the broadest forces. So I think maybe that has something to do with why the hard sort of organizational barriers go down a little bit, and you're more open to working together with other organizations. And I think, in previous discussions, we've touched on how difficult it is to build united front work, right? There's all kinds of obstacles that we confront in terms of rallying together the broadest layers. And sometimes it's very sectarian reasons. Other times it's God knows. But that remains in my understanding, a constant challenge that you guys face in your work to build the broadest front possible. I was wondering if maybe either of you have anything to say on that, like how you deal with the challenges of building united front work?
Well, it's hard because there is so much turfishness and sectarianism on the left, and that needs to be fought against. But we've seen successes. A year ago, I was down at the defense in Florida of the Uhuru organization, the Uhuru Three, who were facing federal charges.
Who are the Uhuru? Maybe just for
it's a black nationalist group that goes back to the 70s. They were getting charged with being unregistered agents of the Russian government because they opposed the U.S. in Ukraine and had been doing some black reparations work.
So these are black nationalists who are being accused of being Russian state agents.
Exactly.
Can't make this stuff up.
So we were there for their trial and their sentencing, and through that, though, we networked. They actually did a political defense, to try to get people out to the courtroom and have rallies. And through that, we met a lot of people. Also, and today, by the way, one of their supporters in New Jersey is facing a court hearing that we'll be in attendance at. And through all that work, for example, case of Kalani Kosa in South Africa, which was an important defense case that was victorious, Uhuru came to endorse the Kosa defense. So it takes a lot of work and patience. It is possible to break down some of these and motivate why an injury to one is an injury to all.
Yeah. For our listeners who don't know, the Kalani Kosa case is that of a black militant from the Economic Freedom Fighters, that's the EFF, Black Nationalist Party in South Africa. So through fighting in defense of people across the world, you're also helping to build those links internationally and link up why people from both those countries, why it's in their interest to fight together against both the South African government, who's totally beholden to the Trump regime right now, as well as, in defense of Uhuru. So I think that's a really powerful example, again, of just an injury to one being an injury to all at the end of the day. So I appreciate that. I'm not sure if you guys want to highlight other stuff from this year. I'm sure there's more we can talk about, but I wondered if we can maybe just have a look ahead as well, because defense work is never ending. In fact, there's more and more of it these days. So unless there's something else you want to talk about from 2025, we can talk a little bit about what's ahead. Yeah, go on, Kat.
I just have one other thing, which I think has been very controversial, and that's the case of Lucy Letby, the young
for sure,
working class nurse who we organized. This was another thing that we were very happy about, to be able to kind of bring to the holiday appeal that we just had.
Maybe you can just explain what the case is and why it's important, because it's so controversial, not just in the left, but I think in society.
So it's controversial because, this is a young working class nurse. She was accused and really scapegoated for murdering babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital, which I think is near Liverpool. And, she was convicted not this past summer, but the summer before, and basically, is destined to spend the rest of her life in prison, more or less. And it's why it's so important is because it's so clear that the evidence that she was convicted on was really, false, like the statistics. And I mean, I can't go through all the ins and outs. Actually, there, if you can get reams and reams and reams of papers about it, but essentially, the methods and the things that she was accused of doing are simply not what happened.
Yeah, from my understanding, I mean, we've written about it in Workers' Hammer and Women Revolution, actually, we reprinted it. But from my understanding, it's from all the sort of evidence they have, the scientific evidence, to how the trial itself was conducted. I think it's a total frame up. And I think, importantly, a number of prominent medical professionals and research scientists and, real experts have come forward taking issue with a lot of things and agreeing that maybe they don't say Lucy Letby should be freed, but definitely that there should be a retrial. And the BBC, in fact, has made a documentary on this, which is...
Yeah, the better one actually is the BBC, in its usual, so-called even-handedness, was very agnostic on the question, whereas the ITV one, which is really... If you can access it online, I think it's really worth watching. It goes through the case in very clear detail and really lays out sort of the basis for, I think we believe that she's innocent, but the way that it's sort of expressed in the public is the conviction is not safe. But what it really revealed, the case is, and we interviewed actually for Workers' Hammer, a representative of a group called 19 Nurses, which is healthcare, primarily nurses, but healthcare professionals who've come out, and unfortunately, a lot of them have to remain anonymous because they really and legitimately fear reprisals for, speaking up for Lucy Letby. We actually did an interview with them, which really made it very clear that what they did to Lucy Letby is really what they can do to any other nurse or healthcare professional in the NHS. And that's why this case is actually so important, because that is exactly what this shows, that as the infrastructure is crumbling and staff are overworked and you can't criticize anybody or ask questions or whatever, you're just kind of beaten down. That's going to be bad for the healthcare workers and it's bad for patients. So to take up her defense and really push back this narrative that she is, the way that she was vilified, and actually really lay the blame at the fact that the NHS is completely underfunded, understaffed, people are overworked. I think that's really the point that we're trying to highlight, and that she needs to be released. So we organized a protest in Birmingham and then also in Liverpool. And what was really remarkable about it is that not a single left organization has taken up this cause, despite the fact that they, have headline after headline talking about save the NHS, save the NHS. And here's a very concrete case of an NHS worker being gone after for exactly the same kind of things that they're talking about is, the problem with the NHS. And instead, what you had, which, I think these demos were actually quite successful, because you had healthcare professionals who came out and actually people from a broad political spectrum, which is, very good. And it's good for her, too. But I do think it says a lot about the left that they have really refused. And in discussions, in fact, some have gone quite hysterically kind of against Lucy Leppy, which is really quite striking.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sewer press and, well, in this case, it's kind of the mainstream media, actually. But I think the left really bends to this sensationalized vilification of like, oh, baby murder. But if you actually step back and you look at it from the point of view of like competing classes, right, and the state of the country, and I think the point is this is a healthcare worker who's been scapegoated for just the fact that the NHS is absolutely broken. Dead babies it's just much easier to whip up a whole hysteria around and then, blame one person based on shoddy evidence and then not have to do anything about the dire state of the neonatal wards in so many hospitals across the country. So yeah, I think that's how we're choosing to approach this case, not capitulate to the hysteria around it, but actually look at it from the point of view of class interests. And I think importantly, as part of that, we've been calling on the healthcare unions, essentially the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, which represents a lot of the nurses, to take up her fight. But of course, they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole because of how charged the case is. But ultimately, what this needs is a working class struggle to defend healthcare workers and to actually fight for the NHS, bottom line. My understanding. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, thank you for raising Lucy Leppy. That is a really important case, I think, and and I think it will continue to be in the coming period. So let's now turn to what's up ahead. I guess a little bit of 2026. Who knows what that's gonna bring, but I know that there's already some stuff in the works or that we have plans for, and I'm gonna take it to you, John, because you guys in New York are dealing with Eric Dupree. Maybe you could just lay out for a non-American audience what that case is and what's happening with it.
Sure. Well, an important part of the PDC's work in the U.S. is building the campaign to open police archives, fighting to expose the cases of police brutality to public scrutiny, to get the worst cases out there so that people know what's happened. And one of those cases in New York is the case of Eric Dupree, who was killed by a cop who threw an ice cooler at his head as he was riding by on a scooter and killed him. We've been organizing United Front protests with BLM of Greater New York at the courthouse. The cops mobilized in force to defend their cooler killer cop. And we've had to fight to get supporters of the family into the courtroom to counter the cops. Finally, after 2 years of delays, the case is going to trial January 14th in the Bronx. So we're mobilizing, again, United Front Defense to get people out for the trial on the first day.
And you were mentioning to me that this is the first time a cop is going to trial in how many years?
Yeah, we think since 2018. This is the first cop to go on trial for an on-duty killing. So it's very important to get out and send a message. He's opted for a trial by the judge, not a jury, because he doesn't want to have to stand in front of Blacks and Latinos from the Bronx to judge him. But that's why we need to get the public out to show how people in the Bronx feel about this.
Cool. And since this is happening in January, I'm wondering, is there any information you could share about what our listeners could do to help build it or to support it or anything?
Sure. People can endorse it. We've got flyers. They can get the word out. They can come to the court on January 14th and help us build it in the meantime. And I'm sure we'll have links on the page, but I would say both the PDC in Britain and in the U.S. have lively social media platforms, and there's so many other cases we could talk about, but you can read about them there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, again, it just reflects the nature of what's going on in the world. There's just more and more repression. So there's more and more defense work, I think. I think recently, Kat, you were making the point that we're like going to a rally like every few days to defend somebody. What's next in Britain, Kat? Is there anything on the horizon in terms of your work?
I think we still need to kind of officially launch it, but perhaps this is the occasion to do it. This is going international again, but it is very relevant, which is the defense campaign for Julius Malema.
Oh, yeah.
Comrades in South Africa issued an open letter just a few days ago why all socialists and trade unions have a stake in defending Julius Malema. And we think this is also an international issue because, you were just making the point about how the South African government is totally beholden to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who consider themselves anti-imperialist or socialist should really join this campaign, will likely, have more information about protests or more concrete ways to get involved in that campaign. But so basically, I think Malema was convicted over the summer on some really bogus charges stemming from events that happened like 7 years ago, where he shot a gun in the air, hurt nobody was harmed or whatever. And now at the end of January, he's facing, I think it's sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're organizing, our South African comrades are organizing a campaign to mobilize for that hearing or for that sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this, we think this is an issue that has relevance internationally for the reasons that I've laid out.
I mean, if I could just say a little thing on this, I think the implications, if Malema is to get sentenced, if his conviction is upheld and if he's sentenced, is that he won't be able to run for elections, which is hugely important because he is the main figurehead for the EFF, which for all its problems, is rather popular amongst the Black masses. And it will really set back that party, and not just that party, but what it represents, I think, for the Black struggle in very much, neo-apartheid South Africa. You have the situation where the ANC government totally, is beholden to Trump, as I said. But also right now, one of the main sort of, I guess, things happening in South African politics is the ANC is trying to say to the SACP, its longtime coalition partner, like, you are no longer allowed to have dual membership in our party and your Communist Party. And the SACP, just to show you how rotten it's become, is they're like, no, please let us remain members of the ANC, the super pro-imperialist ANC party, So I think why I'm saying that is just to give you a bit of the lay of the land of what's happening in South African politics and how much of a setback it would be for the struggle of the Black masses in the country if Julius Malema was to be sentenced. And, it would really just confirm that the government is going to go the way of Trump. And all that's going to do is drive the conditions for the masses farther down. So yeah, hugely important. And again, it will be international, wherever we can. We will mobilize for it. And yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that. I'll link in the show notes what our comrades have recently written. They're trying to build this broad united front. Several other organizations have already signed on in South Africa, and we're trying to build, I think, internationally at the moment. So yeah, thanks for raising that. Is there anything else that is worth noting?
Well, I just comment, a question is, well, why should workers be taking up the defense of
good point, yeah,
immigrants, Palestinians, et cetera? And it's important to understand that first they come for the immigrants, the pro-Palestinian students, but they are already deporting immigrant union leaders in the United States. David Huerta, the head of the SEIU in California, goes on trial next month for having observed a ICE raid in his hometown, and they charged him with obstructing and taking him to trial. So, if you go on strike and actually stop the scabs, they're going to call you a terrorist, and all these devices they're coming up with to go after leftists and immigrants now is going to be used against the labor movement. So it's a tough time. People want to keep their heads down, may feel isolated or scared, but it's really important to take up these causes, talk about them, learn about them, and get out and help fight. And by fighting, we can start to unite people of different perspectives and start to build unity in the left to fight for socialism and have an impact on the working class.
Yeah. And I think the Uhuru and Koza point that you made earlier is an illustration of that. The RCG work in Britain with, the SOAS2 is an illustration of that. So yeah, I guess, overall, for me, one of the points I want listeners to take away is how United Front defense work is just so key to strengthening the left and to strengthening the position of the oppressed and the working class right now. And I think the job of communists has to be to make those connections explicit and clear So they understand, okay, well, why does it matter? Like, why should I defend Malema? Well, you should go and read out the pamphlet that our South African comrades put out, because they do a really good job of explaining why that's important. Yeah. Okay.
One last plug, since to sort of circle back to the beginning, which is, the PDC in Britain has reactivated after some years of being, more or less dormant. And John mentioned the stipend program for prisoners in the US. And we're trying to actually do something similar here, or do the same thing here, which is actually pick a few cases that we can particularly highlight, perhaps some that don't get as much media attention, as much sort of flashy headlines, from other people, but also, sometimes cases that are of particular importance because of the content of what the case is about. So we do want to build a program like that, a stipend program here, where we make regular monthly donations to prisoners while they're behind bars. And I would like to encourage, people who are listening who think that is also important to, we can put the details for how to donate to the PDC. But we always, we don't take money from the state. We don't get grants. We don't get any of that stuff. Our income is purely based on people who support it, that actually support the cause. So anyone who's listening that wants to support that work and make a donation, whether it's one-off or become a regular monthly, make regular monthly donations, we'll leave those details in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I should have raised that earlier. As I said, at the outset, it's a material question. You can't defend just by having nice wishes, although that's welcome and lovely. Need money. Prisoners need money. Their families need support in fighting for their loved ones. And it's as easy as just setting up, whatever you can afford, of course. But there's, I think, direct debit that you can do, like a regular standing order for £10. That's 2 coffees.
Yeah.
$10 or whatever.
And we also like the PDC has also made donations to other people's legal defense funds, including actually one we highlighted at our holiday party, which was that to the Birmingham bin strikers, where we donated £500 because these guys are on, so it's very concrete. The question of solidarity and class solidarity. These guys have been on strike for nearly a year. And so we made, donation of £500 and actually were able to present a check, so to speak, to a representative from the Birmingham bin strike who attended and spoke at our event. And those are the kinds of things that we also raise money for. So when you donate to the PDC, these are the kinds of things, besides printing or publishing and things like that, we also make donations to other people's legal and other defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so standing order, you can set that up. I'll link that in the show notes, or, one-off donations. Again, I think it's really, really important to highlight we do not accept money from the state, which is hugely important because, that's a class line. But centrally, we raise money through our supporters, people who agree with the cause. So the more people agree, the better. But, that also puts a limit. We don't have unlimited, we're not sloshing around in money. We don't have unlimited funds. So if you can give, please do give, because it goes towards strengthening the position of the working class and fighting for the defense of these prisoners or other class struggle fighters.
And it all depends on donations from workers. And in the U.S., we typically go to union meetings. We sold 12 tickets to the UAW Human Rights Committee for our Chicago holiday appeal already.
There you go.
And we certainly look forward to raising money with the holiday appeal and building the sustainers, and also using the events to organize defense around all these other cases and causes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I will link all that information for the different ways in which you can donate or become a sustainer in different countries in the show notes. Okay, I think that about covers it. Is that all right? Yeah.
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 Okay, cool.
It's been a good discussion, and I congratulate you all on the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And likewise. And best of luck with the Dupree trial. I hope it's a good outcome.
If you're in the US and you're in one of the cities where we have holiday appeals, I would strongly urge you to go and check it out because they're really fun, interesting, invigorating events.
Yeah, politics and drinking.
If you're in another organization, bring your pamphlets or some leaflets so that people can find out what you're doing and what cases you're raising.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. And they'll be in New York, Chicago, LA, and Oakland in the Bay Area, yes? Yeah. Okay, cool. Again, all that information will be in the show notes. All right, comrades, thank you so much for your time to share with us all the work that you guys have been doing. There's obviously a lot more. Do follow our comrades on social media to stay up to date with their work, but also with the different cases and how you can help. So thanks again for your time to come on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.